Hi, everyone. I'm Kyle Woody, founder and executive director of Jack's Caregiver Coalition, where our mission is to improve the way that guys think, feel, and act through every phase of their caregiving journey. In a moment, I'll be joined by Mr. Aaron Hill, and I'm excited to introduce you to him today and excited that we get to share his story with you. I'm honored to be your host for our final fundraising campaign of 2020, Give to the Jacks Day, in which we're collaborating with givemn.org for Give to the Max Day, which is Minnesota's annual giving holiday. This year, it's on November 19th. Our goal for this campaign is to raise $12,000, which will give us the ability to make 16 more stories like Aaron's a reality, stories of caregiver support. On average, we spend $750 to support one caregiver for an entire year. And so the 12,000 would allow us to support 16 more caregivers like Aaron. And I'm excited that we've been blessed by a $5,000 matching grant from an anonymous donor so that your donation would be doubled up to $5,000. And now it's my honor to welcome to you, Mr. Aaron Hill, our first Give to the Jacks Day honoree of 2020. Aaron, welcome to our show. How are you?
Thank you, Kyle. I'm doing well.
Awesome.
Glad to be here.
I'm going to do a little intro for Aaron, a short bit about his story that was actually featured in the Star Tribune recently. Aaron, his wife, Kathryn, was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer in June of 2016. She was 37 at the time and pregnant with their couple's fifth child. Their baby boy, Isaac, died a few weeks later. In 2019, Kathryn's cancer moved into her spine and she became a paraplegic. Kathryn died in August this year after a 4-year battle with cancer. And and I have to say, Aaron, I was really hesitant to ask you to be a part of this campaign because this was so recent. Um, but I don't know, I did anyways. And so thank you so much for joining us today and sharing a little bit about your story. I'm going to start off with just a story, that I know about you, and that in our most recent fundraising campaign, you made yourself a generous donation, and we called you to thank you for the donation, and that was on August 21st. And I will never forget it, Aaron. You wept openly on the phone with me, um, unlike anyone that I've ever uh, witnessed on. It was awesome to be a part of that moment, um, and I just felt so privileged that you would share that level of vulnerability with me. And at the time, you informed me that she had just entered hospice very recently, and it's I think important to mention too that she lost her life the next day, August 22nd. Um, and I'm wondering if you can give our audience a peek into that moment, into that experience. What triggered that response, um, and just what was going on in your house that day.
Yeah, yeah. I've been thinking about this, and you, when you're in active treatment, and when your spouse is in active treatment, or the person you're caring for, that's your focus. You're squarely focused on the logistics of fighting cancer, and your role as a caregiver, I think, changes. Your perspective definitely changes, or my perspective changed or my stance changed towards cancer when she moved into hospice about 3 weeks prior. And you know, earlier that day, when you had called, you know, we had met with you know, a hospice nurse who was making daily visits, and it became clear that my wife was becoming more unresponsive, and that they felt, you know, she was probably within, you know, a few days of passing away. So even though we had been in hospice, at that point it really became real, because now I felt like you know, I might not have, you know, any more opportunities to, you know, talk to her. So when you called, it just it was kind of like just like a dam opening up, you know. So there was a lot built up, and you know, in that moment, I think what I realized is that I really needed someone outside of my immediate circle of family. Not even necessarily to talk to, because, you know, we talked a little bit, but, you know, we didn't have, you know, this major, deep, profound conversation. But we didn't need that. I didn't need that. It was more in that moment I needed someone just to receive whatever was coming out. And so it was important. And I, you know, I've thought about that, and that really kind of is one of the main reasons why Jax is here. As guys, caregivers, and I'm no different, that it's tough to, you know, open up, certainly with people that are very close to the situation, very close to, you know, my wife. Hard to open up in certain ways with those people. So in that moment, just, it was kind of a dam broke, because you were there, and it was you were available, and you were not within that, you know, immediate circle of family. And it's important to have those resources as caregiver, to reach out to, and you actually reach out, you know, to me, not knowing what you were going to get on the other end of the line.
Yeah, we joked about it, right? That I think you said, you know, I bet you've never gotten that response when you thank a donor, and it's true. I never have, and I think, especially considering the situation you were in, there could have been no better response. Like, that was absolutely what was called for, and I love the way you framed um, that we didn't really talk that much. We didn't have this earth-shattering, you know, long or intense conversation, but yet, to me, there's still this exchange that's so important, and um, that you can, you know who's on the other end of the phone, that they understand um, what you're going through, and you don't have to explain it. And that's a lot of what our community, I hope, does for caregivers like you, is remove the responsibility to explain or even talk sometimes,
Yeah.
um, and to let that dam let it go, and then then we can laugh about it, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's what's, I think sometimes folks think of a group like this as like we're all just in the fetal position weeping all the time, and yeah, it happens, right? Like, that's the real deal, from time to time, but that's not all the time, and we shouldn't be ashamed of those emotions, because they're nothing to be ashamed of. um, but we don't spend our life there. We move on, and we find ways to laugh about it. um, So thank you for sharing, and then just thank you for sharing. Allowing us to share that story, because that wasn't meant for the world. But as I reflected on experiences I've had with you, that one rose to the very top immediately, and so I'm glad we could share it with our audience. And speaking of, I just want to remind our audience we are raising funds today for our mission. It's our final campaign of the year. Our goal is to raise $12,000, which will allow us to make 16 more stories of support, um, like Aaron's, possible. Of course, the story I just shared was Aaron supporting us, right? Like he supported us, and that's such a common experience working with caregivers, is they're not really good at receiving, and they quickly are on the giving end again, and which is such an honor for us. Um, and so you can go to givemn.org and just search for Jack's Caregiver Coalition, and you'll find our page where you can make a donation. And if you're unable to donate, if you could just share um, our campaign and our goal and these stories with your network, we would be so honored. Um, I want to move to the next question here, Aaron, which is I recall you writing about, and maybe us also just talking at one point or another, about a concept which I had never heard of prior to meeting you, called meaningful suffering. I'm wondering if you can share with us what that phrase means to you, and how it's helped you on your journey.
Yeah. Um, so, as a caregiver, I I wasn't the one diagnosed with cancer. I wasn't the one who had a life within me lost. We lost our son in utero. I wasn't the one who lost uh, a form of my identity. As a caregiver, kind of indirectly, yes, but my wife experienced firsthand this type of suffering. And it's tough to fully relate. As a caregiver, I couldn't. On an abstract level, I could understand what she was going through, and engage in some empathy, and over the years, lots of empathy. But I was still, maybe half a degree removed. And I really, and I think anybody out there that's been a caregiver to, especially, spouse that's going through cancer, I wanted to absorb every bit of cancer and every bit of pain that she was experiencing. I wanted to take it on. I wanted to take it from her, but I couldn't. She had to endure it, and she didn't really have a choice. She had to wake up and live through that. She had to deal with those things directly and firsthand, and I was a support role. But in my desire to take on that suffering that she was experiencing, I found that for me, a readily accessible way to experience something similar on a very small scale, something similar, was running. And in my case, ultra marathons, or a few ultra marathons or trail marathons. And it was something that I could do. And what I found was that, working through physical pain, that you can experience when you're training or running a race, or somehow, running for me, I found a bit of a connection there. And yeah, I did write about that on my blog. And there was a race that I did up in Duluth. It was a marathon, a trail marathon in January. And, who would do a marathon in Duluth in January on the trails in the snow? Yeah, not many. Yeah, but I did that because I wanted something difficult. I wanted to, challenge. And so, during that race, it was, the trail conditions were tough. It was a slog, and for most of the race, I was alone by myself, because there weren't many people running, especially after the first half of the race. Half the field dropped out because the trail conditions were really difficult.
Yeah.
And so, I found myself alone with a lot of time to think, experiencing physical pain. And, there's a point at which, at one aid station, it was maybe 6-7 miles left to go. The people manning the aid station asked me if I wanted to continue. I said, yeah, this is what I signed up for. Because that I wanted to experience something difficult, something painful, something challenging, and then continue. Because my wife was experiencing something painful, something challenging, and she had to continue. She couldn't just stop. I could stop. I could go back to the shower, warm up. But I didn't. And so like I was saying, so running for me has been a form of meaningful suffering, so that I could connect more with what she was experiencing, understand that, she had to just exist in that state of suffering. And I wanted to be able to stand with her in that, and exist in her state of suffering, and understand that a little bit more. And so, yes, I had the choice. It was something voluntary that I did. She didn't have the choice to take on cancer. I had the choice to take on running.
Yeah.
So it was a small way, but it did help. I think it helped make me a better caregiver, because I was able to kind of just sit and exist in that state of suffering with her, over time.
Yeah, and I think that's such a powerful way to help our audience understand the degree to which and the extent to which caregivers will go for their loved ones. There is no limit, and I I know of other folks who run, who do extreme physical activities, and I suspect they are sort of doing it for that reason. They just don't have the clarity necessarily that you have. They're searching for some way to suffer, and psychologically we suffer, and I do believe that the brain can't tell the difference. If it's a psychological suffering or a physical one, to your brain, it's the same, and you feel pain equally. But I can imagine that taking it another step, like you did, and really actually feeling physical pain on top of the psychological pain, um, helped you feel more connected to Kathryn, and which is awesome and inspiring. Um, yeah, but and maybe that's what was missing in my journey. I certainly never could say that I experienced a physical suffering like that. But
I wouldn't think it. Um, doesn't have to be running. It doesn't, it can be anything. But I think it's beneficial for the caregiver to find some way to access that. Um, for me, like I said, running was easily accessible. It was something that I already did, I already loved to do. But running the ultra marathon, going beyond the marathon distance, takes it to a little bit different level, and but it doesn't have to be that. Not everybody's thing.
Yeah. A lot of
There,
people could not make anywhere, like physically, they just wouldn't make it. You happen to be in excellent shape.
uh, it, it can be something else, but I found some meaning in it, and I would encourage other caregivers, to find some meaningful suffering out there to help you connect more with your.
Yeah.
Um,
What I hear you doing too is you're choosing your attitude in the face of the suffering. Whereas a lot of times I think when we suffer, um, it's a programmed response. It's kind of a default. There's anger, there's sadness, there's these all these emotions that are triggered by the suffering. But what I hear you doing is making that choice and leaning into it with a level of intentionality that just, I don't know, you're just determined. That's the attitude. Um, and it's so much more of a powerful position to be in as a caregiver, when you are choosing that attitude, um, because we're as caregivers we're suffering all the time, um, and we're not always choosing the attitude. Um, so another question, Aaron, I recall, and I don't remember. I'm going to guess that it was 2017, the summer of 2017, when I met you and Kathryn at was probably our first or second. We called it a kick-ass brunch buffet, and I don't know why we called it that. It just sounds funny, I guess. But part of it was we found some caregivers in our community that really inspired us, and that we wanted to shine a light on them and have them share their their stories with a community of people, families like yours, and so, but since then you've been a part of various, um, programs and activities at Jax, and I would say the fact that you've participated in any of them is inspiring because of the level of responsibilities you have had, and continue to have. But I was wondering, of all the things, that you've done with us or participated in, um, is there a story of someone or some thing? Because we're always wondering what of our program makes the biggest impact. Where should we focus our work, harder, and um, so I was wondering if you had anything to share.
yeah, a couple things for me come to mind. One of the first things that I did, was the caregiver collatch in Minneapolis. It was close to, when I was working in an office, which I'm not now because of COVID, but when I was working in the office in Minneapolis, it was close by, so I could go there right after work, and it wasn't a huge impact on my family time wise, because I felt, probably even a little bit guilty just doing that, taking time away from my wife and kids. But she encouraged me to go, which was a good thing. So the caregiver clutch was good. It was like the first opportunity that I had as a caregiver to be with other caregivers that were experiencing a lot of the same things I was, and to talk about those things. Um, so that was pretty impactful for me, just to have an outlet, and to know that I wasn't alone, and there were other guys experiencing some of the same things I was. Um, the other thing that comes to mind, there are lots of other events that Jax has done, social events that always look super fun. And while I want to do some of that stuff, but I like I said before, I kind of felt guilty, and I always felt guilty taking time away. And I know I'm not alone in feeling that way among caregivers, especially men. But there was an event you had at Top Golf, and I think that was earlier this year. I think
Yeah, it was. It seems like it was 10 years ago.
Seems like it was so long ago. But that was the first social event that I went to, and I felt guilty just going, but it was really impactful because it was kind of like the first time I let myself kind of step out of the caregiver role and do something just for fun. And it seemed frivolous, and it was, and that's exactly what it needed to be.
Right.
It's exactly what it needed to be. And maybe I didn't realize how much stress that I was putting myself under as the main caregiver to my wife. And that was a pretty stressful time too, earlier this year, in her health. So it was really good. It was really needed just to be out, be with some guys, and do something that didn't have a lot of meaning. Just hit some golf balls, and it was fun. And I really needed that in that moment. So it may seem like, wow, this is just kind of a silly thing, but that's what it needed to be.
Yeah.
And I felt a little bit more refreshed when I got back home, and that feeling lasted for a while. So it was an important event, and it meant a lot.
And it was fun. It was also cool to just be outside in Minnesota in January and
Yeah,
not, freezing to death.
yeah.
Just getting fresh air, like how much of that do we lose sight of in the upper Midwest that, you need to change your physical space. And, some people are good at going out and getting, snowshoeing or doing all those things that you really need to do, caregiver or not.
Mm-hmm.
But especially when you're in a situation like you've been in for the last several years. And um, and offline, we'll have to talk about what do we do to help these guys with the guilt, because I promise you, we hear from guys over and over again. I've had your flyer on my desk for 3 years, and I've not reached out for a variety of reasons, but a lot of times it is that, you know, how could I, this, like you said, frivolous or and I
Mm-hmm.
love the way you said that. It's exactly what it needs to be.
Yep.
These caregivers have sacrificed so much for so long. They've forgotten what joy is. Where do they get joy in their life? Um, and we love to be a part of that. And it's so much fun um, just to go be silly and,
Yep.
and
Yep.
play and just goof around. And sometimes, we do talk about cancer or
Yep.
loss, or, it's not like we avoid that. Just as an organization, we don't set the agenda. The people that show up decide how they're gonna, we just say, here's something fun to do. Um, and luckily, no one got hurt. and fell. You know. So yeah, well, I just again, Aaron, want to express my gratitude to you for taking the time to be with us today, and we are so sorry for your loss. Um, it's um, it's catastrophic beyond words, and um, we're just honored to be a part of your journey and and to have the privilege to help you out along the way. Um, I also want to express gratitude to our virtual producer, Mr. Chris Cloutier, is behind the scenes here, making this possible. I think it's important to mention that a lot of nonprofits are doing virtual fundraisers, but they also have to pay for that service. And Chris is blessing us with his skill and his talent so that 100% of the proceeds go to our mission. So thank you, Chris. You do fabulous work. And I want to also express gratitude for our up and coming honorees, Mr. Bob Breck, whose interview will air on Thursday, the next Thursday at 9 a.m. And for our final honoree, Mr. Eric Sheppers, his interview will air on Give to the Jacks Day, November 19th at 9 a.m. And lastly, thank each and every one of you for taking the time to watch this and witness, be a witness to Aaron's story, and for considering making a donation at givemn.org. We think that is perhaps the quickest and most impactful way to join us on our mission to improve the way that guys think, feel, and act through every phase of their caregiving journey. And so have a great week, everyone.
Thank you.